He's Aaron. I'm Frank, and welcome to the program. I have to say, Aaron, I love technology. It always makes me happy. So,
It
so, so, so happy.
it's always been our friend, Frank.
He says with tongue firmly planted in cheek. Yeah, so let's talk about what's going on in the world of sports, and especially, of course, as always, with Canadians in sport or Canadian teams. And we'll begin with the maple leaf that most people know, the blue one, as the blue one, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the Toronto Maple Leafs have an opportunity here on the right side of their defense to have something they can sell to another team or sit on in the event of a guy like Tanev not being able to play, Aaron, right?
It's a really difficult situation. Having just won a Calder Cup and having exploded for 23 points in 24 games, William Villeneuve, who's just signed a 2-year extension with Toronto, could potentially be on his way out. The problem is Toronto has Radish, Tanev, and Troy Stetcher on the right side of the blue line, which could potentially mean that William is sitting on the outside looking in. Not to mention the fact that Philippe Myers is more often than not a healthy scratch. There's always injury concerns. Plus, there's also the factor that OEL could be used on the right side as well. For a guy that's had a really decent season and a fantastic postseason for the Marlies, he could very well find himself on the outside looking in. But that also comes with the chance he could become everything that the team expects and more. If he does manage to get himself into more games than 3 this season, he could very well be just the defenseman that they're looking for. And the fact that he's slightly older sort of factors into this too, because he's closer to maturing. As everybody knows, goalies and defensemen tend to mature a little bit later than forwards just because they have more responsibilities. So, getting a shot is going to be tough, and he very well may not get it. But at the same time, there is still that lingering possibility that Chili Willy could make it in.
The problem with him, I guess, Aaron, would you say it's safe to say that if this were last year and he had those kinds of points before this season, he would have been a guy that they would have framed and said, we're looking for an offensive defenseman. He's in our system. The problem is the Leafs have made a few moves that have basically brought in offensive defensemen. So they've kind of inserted a couple of players that would be considered ahead of him because his asset is his offense, right? But I think his size and his mobility also is something else that the Leafs could use and that he could be an asset because of.
Well, and the fact that he's a very good puck moving defenseman, as well as having a shot that can get through from the point, is something that can't be denied. He had quite a few goals this season by jumping in on the rush, and that's sort of the offensive opportunities that, as of late, Morgan Riley hasn't really taken.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those things that could serve him in good stead.
The Morgan Riley thing, though, is Morgan is a left defenseman, and that would mean one of the things you said was OLE going to the right side would cement him further in the left side. So there's movements that can be made, and what I really like about so far, again, I don't know what their trades they received looks like, but I think most people are giving a thumbs up to what Chayka appears to be doing and how he's done it. And for me, making the trades for the goaltenders, how often I talked about that last season and how important I felt that was, because they were an asset they had that where they didn't have assets. That was the main asset they had. And it played out, this offseason in that way that, there's your asset, use it. And he did. And, goaltending, is it a problem? Do we have an old goaltender? Yes. If I was a Leaf fan, say we have a good backup goaltender, I would say yes. But both those answers can change for different reasons. One for, of course, Bobrovsky being, Wednesday over the hump day, if he's over the hump day. And of course, Stolarz, health wise, has not been a consistently healthy uh, goaltender, but they've got a young guy in that can maybe move in the event that he's necessary. So the Leafs, I don't think, are in a bad way in goaltending, but what you were talking about was defense, and that defenseman, if he's worthwhile, maybe you package him with somebody to get a top six, a legitimate top six forward, and maybe a center, which would be really what you want, because right now in the plans for the Leafs are centers that also play the wing. I'm not saying that he can't play center, but it would be nice to have a guy that plays center. That's his thing. Not that he can play center, but that he does. All right, 8 AHL coaches who were promoted to the NHL benches this summer. So we have one of them came to Toronto.
Yeah, that's very true. John Gruden of the Toronto Marlies, who coached them to a Calder Cup, has been elevated to an assistant coach with the Maple Leafs. Manny Malhotra is the other big one, going from head coaching the Abbotsford Canucks to the Vancouver Canucks. There's also Ryan Craig, who went from coaching the Henderson Silver Knights to leading the Vegas Golden Knights. There's also Ryan Mushnell, who was leading the Providence Bruins to their best record in the league this season. He was with them for 5 years and was integral in building up a winning culture that would develop. The other one is Rocky Thompson. He turned around a Bridgeport Islanders team that had one of the worst seasons in league history. And once the team brought into his style, they became a great one. They finished the season with the fourth best record in the Atlantics. Trent Vogelhuber is another one. He led the Cleveland Monsters to multiple successful seasons. He's now with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Pascal Vincent was one of the older coaches in the AHL, but certainly one of the best. In his 2 seasons with the Laval Rocket, he won the AHL Coach of the Year in 2025 and had the best record in the North Division in both of the seasons that was there. He moved to the Seattle Kraken, and that's a good one on multiple levels. He's another head coach behind the bench, and better yet, someone who can fill in for Lane Lambert if the team moves on from him at any point. Greg Cronin couldn't do much with the Iowa Wild, a team with a depleted farm system and minimal veteran talent. That said, he's one of the more respected hockey minds and is known for working well with younger players. So the St. Louis Blues are adding him to their overhauled coaching staff. And also looking at Mark Letestu. He was really impressive in his first year behind the Colorado Eagles bench, leading them to the best record in the Pacific. And with the Golden Knights hiring Craig, they're adding another AHL mind to their bench and poaching a coach from the Colorado Avalanche. So there's a lot of movement going on behind the scenes here. It's one of those things that it's an untapped resource. And I know that the NHL has a bad habit of going back to the same 32 coaches over and over again. But the fact that there's 8 AHL coaches now in the mix speaks well to the evolution of the league, as it were.
Absolutely. 3 rules and format changes you think the NHL should implement.
Well, the first one is relatively obvious, and that's the 1 through 8 playoff format. The current format automatically qualifies the top 3 teams of each division, with 2 wildcard teams from each conference filling the remaining playoff spots, regardless of division. Under a true 1 through 8 format, there would be no divisional brackets. Instead, the top 8 teams in each conference would be seeded by regular season points, with the highest seed facing the lowest. This avoids a very common problem that's developed in the past 4 to 5 years with the 1 through 3 and wildcard seeding, in that top seeds wouldn't necessarily be eliminated early, right? Like, for example, in this past season, you would have seen the Hurricanes facing the Penguins, while the Sabres would have played the Flyers, instead of the Flyers and the Penguins facing each other. This has a chance to more develop rivalries as well as highlight Cinderella stories when it came to that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Another change that they could be looking at would be the multi-point system, being the 3, 2, 1, and 0, as opposed to the current 2, 1, and 0. Now, the PWHL has used the 3, 2, 1, 0 since its inaugural season. That's, for those who don't know, 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime or shootout win, 1 point for an overtime or shootout loss, and no points for a regulation loss. A similar system was sort of used during the Four Nations face-off, but the 3-2-1 better rewards teams for winning in regulation and encourages a more aggressive style of play, particularly late in tied games. Now, the last one, and this is the most interesting one to me, Frank, is removing the 2-minute minor for unsuccessful goalie interference challenges. Now, the league's GMs have continued to support the penalty because it discourages coaches from frivolous challenges or challenging every single play and helps keep game flow. But at the same time, because goalie interference is so subjective, depending on which referee you get, that might determine how the call goes. So taking away the danger of that sort of thing certainly helps. But at the same time, it makes coaches a little more wary of exactly what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about how could the Leafs use their new goalie tandem next season.
So the important thing to remember here is Bobrovsky and Stolarz have played together before. Specifically, they won a Stanley Cup together. Now Bobrovsky is 37. He's in the downward half of his NHL career. He's already been in the league for 16 seasons and has over 800 regular season games. But the problem with Stolarz is he's a bit of a glass cannon, meaning when he's actually available, he's a great punch, but at the same time, he's a little bit delicate. Bobrovsky typically plays 50-plus games per season, which dovetails nicely for Stolarz. Because you know what, he most that he's played in the season is actually 33 starts, and using him as a backup could potentially better serve the Leafs. You do have Arturs Aksiomov waiting in the wings, but with Bobrovsky carrying the majority of the load and Stolarz as the backup, that could definitely serve the Maple Leafs well.
Absolutely. Let's go to the second period. Let's talk about the Canadian Football League. And the Rough Riders won a game that I think most of us felt they had the inside track on. Backup quarterback in Hamilton, former Rough Rider quarterback, almost made it to the end of the game, didn't quite do it. Aaron, the Ticats, without a quarterback, suffer the same indignancy that every other team that doesn't have a starting quarterback, a real starting quarterback.
But don't get it wrong, though. Dolegala won 17 for 30 with 122 passing yards, and an INT. Trey Ford subbed him out late in the fourth, completing 5 of 6 for 47 yards. But, they didn't seem able to stop Saskatchewan's rush. And it was difficult. They did pick off Harris twice after halftime, but at the end of the day, this was a pretty not surprising bit of a mismatch. The fact that it ended up the way that it did isn't particularly surprising. Hamilton, after all, was 3-1 going into the game, and Hamilton was 2-2. So the 38-7 final wasn't really all that surprising. I think the quick succession of scores, though, in the third and fourth quarters is what really did them in.
Absolutely. Balanced Alouettes attack fuels win over Stamps. This was a big win for the Owls.
Yeah, it was massive. They put together a 37-30 win at Percival Molson Memorial Stadium. Davis Alexander completed 22 of 30 passes for 300 yards. Tyson Philpott popped for 132 yards and a score. Tyler Snead pitched in 86 receiving yards. At the end of the day, Vernon Adams Jr. just couldn't seem to get it locked in. He did manage to move the offense a good deal in the second quarter. They did manage a 94-yard drive with a short touchdown scamper in the second quarter, but I think that was pretty much it. At the end of the day, it just didn't seem to be enough to carry them through.
Absolutely, Aaron. I tell you, tough situation when you don't have your starting quarterback. The Blue Bombers didn't have their starting quarterback and didn't need him. They had their old backup quarterback back as the new backup and starting for them, Brown, and he did a great job of basically showing the Argonaut defense to be not as good as it was in previous weeks.
Yeah, with 252 yards in the first half and targeting Ontario Wilson, who finished with 10 catches and 133 yards, is one of those things where, it didn't really seem to be in doubt. The Argonauts were down early. The 30-21 win wasn't necessarily a surprise. I think the fact that the Argonauts kept pushing was one thing. Kelly going for 320 yards through the air in a losing effort also helped. But the fact he got sacked 3 times is certainly an issue that they need to address on the offensive line.
Absolutely. The Blue Jays, let's go to baseball. Dylan Cease to start the Major League Baseball All-Star game.
Yeah, this is great for Dylan. So he's going to be starting for the American League. This is kind of neat because he's only the 3rd Blue Jays pitcher to do it. The other 2 were Doc Holliday and Dave Stieb. So he's in a little bit of elite company there. Interesting to note that Doc Holliday also started not only in 2009 for the American League, but also in 2011 for the National League when he was playing with the Phillies. So it's one of those interesting things to see. Cease has certainly had a fantastic season so far with a 2.56 ERA and 148 strikeouts. The home run derby goes tonight. The All-Star game goes tomorrow. It's something I'm interested to catch up on.
Always fun, Aaron. It's always fun. That's for sure. Let's talk about Ty France of the Padres and their late rally. The Jays were ahead, and then late inning they fell apart, and Hoffman again was on the mound.
Yeah, Hoffman seems to be a recurring theme in these sorts of things. But Ty France, since moving on from the Jays and being picked up by the Padres, seems to be one of those guys that's turning into a Jays killer. He had an instrumental role in both of the games that the Jays lost and going 1-2 in their 3-game series with the Padres. Timely hitting from him, as well as Jays pitching's inability to solve him, have kind of led to the situation that they're currently in. I'm glad that they actually have a few days off here to try to rest and regroup. But yeah, their games in San Diego were definitely not fun to watch.
We got a problem with Kawhi Leonard coming to Toronto or not coming to Toronto?
Yeah, apparently the Raptors had no clue that there could potentially be an issue with Kawhi coming. It's not like aspiration was in the news or anything like that, and it's not like the owner of the Clippers was, under suspicion for trying to funnel additional money to him outside of the soft cap that the NBA has. The other thing that apparently they didn't pick up on is if the trade did actually go through before the investigation was completed, the Raptors would have been liable for any financial penalties that would have been incurred by bringing Kawhi back. It seems odd to me that the ownership group wouldn't have picked up on something like that, especially being as cost conscious as they are.
Absolutely. Christine Maldonovich, woe on you, win Wimbledon women's doubles.
Yeah, so we reported earlier last week on Gabriel Dabrowski from Ottawa and Luisa Stefani from Germany moving on to the women's finals. Unfortunately, they ran into Kristina Mladenovic and Guo Han-Yu, who defeated them in straight sets 6-3, 7-5 in the Wimbledon's final on Sunday. Mladenovic has won the French Open doubles tournament 4 times and the Austrian Open twice with different partners, but lost her only previous Wimbledon final in 2014. For Dabrowski, it's a 3rd runner-up finish at Wimbledon after losing the 2019 and 2024 finals. She's won the U.S. Open doubles titles twice. This was Stefani's first Grand Slam doubles final. So close, but no cigar. Hopefully she'll be able to pull it together and get something in the latter half of the year and potentially early 2027.
Talk to me about Mabry.
Oh, Money Mabry has been absolutely fantastic for the Toronto Tempo. She dropped 30 points. Niara Sabali made the tie-breaking basket with 52 seconds left. Toronto managed to blow a 20-point lead, but still beat the New York Liberty 93-91 in Montreal at the Bell Center. This was Mabry's second 30-point game and her fifth game this season, including a 53-point performance in a win over Los Angeles on June 25th. At the end of the game, there were some shenanigans. Mabry got hit in the back by a tossed shoe. Apparently, New York's Betnia Laney Hamilton was trying to throw a shoe back to one of her fellow teammates that lost it, but it hit Mabry in the back. Mabry and Bordenello, Toronto's coach, both confirmed it didn't look like it was intentional. But the rule, according to the WNBA, is objects thrown on the court are not allowed. So it resulted in an ejection with about 2 minutes left. And Mabry was awarded double technical fouls. So, at the end of the day, that basically turned the tide.
Yeah, it certainly did.
It's a weird situation, man.
Yeah, it is. And this is one of those times where just the fact they threw it, that's all. It isn't about if it hit her or not. Your description says they threw it. That's it. That's how you broke the rules. Let's talk about the Habs and what's up with Doc.
So Kirby's going to have his arbitration hearing on July 30th. That's the second to last day of hearings. It also allows another 17 days between now and then for the two parties to reach an agreement. He decided to file for arbitration after the Habs gave him a two-way qualifying offer that included a $4 million NHL salary and AHL salary in the event he couldn't crack the lineup. And he clears waivers to land with the Laval Rocket. It was possible for them to make that kind of offer because of Doc's number of games played, not only in the last year, but in the last 3 seasons. The lowest award the arbitrator could give Kirby would be $3.4 million. And logic dictates that should a deal be reached before the hearing, would have to be somewhere between $3.4 and $4 million. So it's going to be an interesting situation. But as it currently stands, by early August at the latest, the Habs and Doc should be fixed on how much he's going to earn, which could make it easier for Kent Hughes to move him in a trade if he wants to. High-profile RFAs Trevor Zegras and Jason Robertson will also have their arbitration hearings on July 22nd and 25th, respectively.
The Sens are in danger of taking another step back, Aaron?
There's a lot of gears that are turning here. Now, the Ottawa Senators have made the Stanley Cup in each of the past 2 seasons. But last year, this most recent year, they got swept by Carolina. The year before that, they took the Leafs to 6. The Sens basically finished with essentially the same regular season record in the past 2 years. But based on their off season, it's going to be difficult. They traded Tkachuk to the Panthers. They did replace him with Eklund and Andre Burakovsky from the Blackhawks, but there are certain intangibles that Brady brings to the game that they haven't quite completed yet. So there is the very realistic possibility that despite having gotten rid of Brady, they could find themselves in a worse position than last year.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Connor Hellebuyck and, of course, the Winnipeg Jets, a connection to the Buffalo Sabres.
I mean, the consensus here is that Hellebuyck wants to play in Buffalo, but the real question is what's holding up the deal? The biggest factor that many people seem to overlook is Winnipeg's current position. They won the President's Trophy last season while capturing the Central Division title, arguably the NHL's toughest division. They finished ahead of teams such as Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota. But if they return to that level the next season, the Jets could once again find themselves among the Stanley Cup contenders. Kyle Connor's new 8-year contract carrying a $12 million average annual value also begins this season. giving the organization another cornerstone alongside Hellebuck. By all standards, Connor didn't play that well last year. He regressed to an 895 save percentage, finished with a 2.86 goals against average. And for a team that relies on him to steal games, those weren't good enough. But between Winnipeg's deep playoff run and an Olympic year, it's possible that Hellebuck regressed last year just because he was too worn down. So at this point, it's reasonable to postulate that, if the Jets return to where they were in 24-25, those trade rumors may fade. But at the same time, if Winnipeg has a chance to improve their lot by getting rid of him and getting back a couple more pieces in return, it makes things a little more interesting.
Absolutely, it does. So are the Flames going to trade Zach Whitecloud?
Well, that's an interesting position that the Flames find themselves in. Going into the 26-27 season, there's only one player in the current Flames lineup with a Stanley Cup win, and that's Whitecloud, who won it with the Vegas Golden Knights in 2023. Now, he came to Calgary in a deal that sent Rasmus Anderson out to the desert, where he helped them advance to the 2026 Stanley Cup Finals. But the question is, do they want to keep him? He's a right-shot defenseman who is averaging more than 18 minutes a night. He has a chance to play more with the Flames. He was averaging 22-40 with them. He's on Calgary's top pairing with Kevin Ball, who's one of the few core skaters in the organization signed until the next decade. And he's also on the team's top penalty killing unit. The problem that we have here is I don't think they see a lot of offensive upside to him. He's solid defensively, but with 2 years remaining on his deal, somebody may come to Craig Conroy's door to check on his availability before opening night. And at $2.75 million, he could be a value-added pick for any team that gets him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, we can talk about the Oilers, and they made a few trades at the trade deadline. They brought in some Blackhawks, and it turns out they could re-sign them.
Yeah, after exiting the first round, after losing out to the Anaheim Ducks, it's one of those things that he needed to have a look at. They did actually re-sign Jason Dickinson, Connor Murphy, and Colton Dock. That's Kirby's brother. They signed Colton to a 2-year extension with an average annual value of 1.2. It's a great cap hit. It's also variable if they need to. It's one of those situations where they found themselves with a whole bunch of hidden gems that they didn't expect to be needing to re-up, but I'm glad that they have. It extends their options at least for the next 2 years, while Connor McDavid is still trying to work out all the lumps in his contract and get back into the finals.
Absolutely. Well, Vancouver, Elias Patterson, Johnson, what's going to happen there?
Well, Ryan Johnson is quickly making his mark on the franchise, getting Manny Malhotra in and trading Marcus Pettersson and Nils Höglander in separate deals. In addition, he's also signed Brendan Gallagher as well as Jamie Alexiak and Luke Shen. But the biggest chip that Johnson has right now is Elias Pettersson. He's been surrounded by trade speculation for months. Johnson was saying that they've had a very open dialogue since I've come on board. There's a real sense of just being honest without judgment. He's got a ton of respect for him, his journey, and how he's gotten to this point. It's not just for him, but Johnson is looking at carrying this over to all the other players in the organization. They have to consider what's best, and he wants to make sure that there's a clear dialogue and clear honesty while trying to find solutions at the same time. Certainly, being level with your players is a novel approach for most general managers here. And Johnston certainly seems to be working on that for his team.
Fantastic. Any other final comments you have about what happened this past weekend? Mine is the soccer. We're in the semifinal stage, and on the weekend we'll have the final, and of course the consolation. The bronze and
fourth place.
And fourth place. All right, Aaron. Thanks for doing this. He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you all.